Hello everyone. It's been a long day and wonderful day as well. And we figured we would do something slightly different to make sure you were not sleeping. After wonderful activities and wonderful conversations, it's only natural that we get a little tired. And we hope to try to take a different approach today to remind us of the importance of raising our kids, and perhaps invite us as well to think about the spiritual perspective in raising kids. And the name of our conversation today is Launching Rockets. And here is why. Are you ready? Okay.
All systems are go. For about 90 seconds, we will launch a special discovery. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We're transferring to orbiter internal power at this time. Discovery is now running off its 3 onboard fuel cells. Coming up on a go for auto sequence start. Yeah, we have a go for auto sequence start. Discovery's onboard computers are primary control of all the vehicle's critical functions. T-minus 17 seconds and counting. 15, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, start, 2, 1, booster ignition, and liftoff. Guidance now converging. Discovery's onboard computers commanding the main engine nozzle to swivel, aiming the shuttle for its pursuit.
So what does it have to do with raising kids? In my mind, everything. So this video, as you can tell, had a lot of people in it, a lot of planning, a lot of noise, a lot of visual explosions, and so many different things for that rocket with that shuttle to be geared towards space. And if you go back to when we first put a man on the moon, you could have seen something even more spectacular. It took us more than 10 years of planning, thousands of people working, millions of man hours, more than 2.5 million different pieces that had to come together to create the rocket. And all of that for 22 hours on the moon. That's how long we stay there, right? And it's a highly complex and highly difficult piece of engineering that takes place that we often don't see when we just hear about the man who landed on the moon, on the space shuttle up in the air. But the truth is, I feel like parenting, it's more complex than putting a man on the moon. And in many different ways, it's a lot messier too. And it's harder. Nevertheless, if we are to use this metaphor of launching rockets, there might be some tips that we can then connect to our realities and our spiritual perspectives, and then apply that to how can we practically and daily employ these ideas to actually raising our kids. So, of course, we have a couple of minutes only, but we're going to go quickly, as a rocket should, because I know you're tired, through these 5 points and leave you with an invitation to reflect more on your own experience as well. Does that make sense? All right, so tip number 1 that we can always give is a simple one. When you have kids, it's their journey. It's not your journey. We're not here for them to do what we want them to do. We take this on, motherhood, fatherhood, so that we can prepare them to do whatever it is that they want to do. And that's a really hard awareness for us, for parents, because during our day-to-day we forget, and sometimes we even want them to do the things that we wanted to do ourselves when we were younger and we couldn't. I see a lot of parents sometimes wanting their kids to be fathers generally, great soccer players or great football players and great baseball players, but that's not what the kid wants. And they're not here to fulfill that which we want. We are here to fulfill what we must, to make sure that they can do the best that they have to for their own lives. That's a really important awareness, because sometimes we think that our job is to either make them happy, which is not, and we talked earlier about this today, it's about keeping them safe and giving them the tools to realize their own mission. In that sense, we are mission control. They are the rocket. We can plan. We can do all of that. But the astronauts, once the ship takes off, they are the ones who are going to call the moves. And that is hard. That is really hard for mission control to let go. But we must. Because we're not here for ourselves. We're here for them. And when we add our spiritual layer on top of this, we realize that that is the case. Through reincarnation, we understand that they are immortal spirits just like we are. And we are preparing them not only for this life, but potentially for many others. Not to fulfill what we want, but to prepare them for what is to come. Does that make sense? So that's one tip that we can give. It's their journey. It's not our journey. And if you're ready, willing, and able to roll into number 2, tip number 2 is a simple one. A different launch. Every rocket has a different launch. You have to treat every single kid differently. Not as you want them to grow, but as they need your help to get there. And if you have siblings, if you have twins, even then, it's not about giving the same things or treating them the same way. It's about differentiating and knowing what each one of them may require to accomplish that mission. And if you have 2 kids, you know this. They are different. They were raised, like we were saying before here, in the same household with the same love, but they can be completely different people. So you can also just expect that whatever it is that you've done for one will work for other. Much the same way, we also have to understand that you had your own launching as a rocket, but they are in a different place and time. Their childhood cannot and must not be just like yours. We have wonderful memories about our times, and sometimes we want our kids to have the same experiences that we had. But the truth is, the world is different. The world has changed, and God has placed them here and now for you to empower them to deal with the things of here and now. So don't get stuck to what was in your life or where you grew up. understand that you're here now, and they're here now for a reason. And this is also an important awareness. You don't have to be your parents. Yes, you've learned from them, but you don't have to be your parents. You choose which kind of parents do you want to be. And that's a beautiful thing because every launch is different. And we're not just preparing this rocket for this launch. We are preparing this astronaut, this rocket, for this launch, but hoping that it would also take away with it all the abilities it needs for future launches, because we know what we learn in this life carries over to next lives as well. So the responsibility of parents from a spiritual perspective is increased when we understand that we're not only preparing them for this life, to succeed in this life, but to have the tools to navigate the challenges that they must. So every launch is different, which means every preparation, every training has to be tailored to that end. Are you with me so far? So that's tip number 2. But if we keep on launching our rockets here, we might ask ourselves, Dan, what's tip number 3? Haha, you don't have to wait. Don't worry, because we're going to go quick. All right, so tip number 3 here. Share the mission goals. What do I mean by that? Well, we talked a little bit about before, and I feel like this is a good one. It's about principles versus rules, right? When astronauts get trained, they are told what to do. But more importantly, they are told what to do because there is a reason for doing that. They're told the why they need to do things, and then they understand. Because if those conditions change, then they can go back to what they know they must do and do things differently. So it's not about memorizing things. It's not about rules. It's about principles. Right? Because if you just give people rules, they don't know why the rules are there, and they might just not do them. And you might realize that younger kids nowadays, they're not into rules. But if you explain the principle, they might understand what you mean. So what do I say by that? Imagine a teenager that lives in your household, and you've told this teenager that he has to sleep at 10 o'clock every night. And he's playing his games, and then 10 o'clock comes around, and he's going to stretch it to 10:15, and you're going to say, go to sleep at 10 o'clock. And that's going to be a negative interaction all the time, because you're going to have to be nagging said teenager to do that. But on the other hand, if you sit down first with your teenager and explain, hey, you need to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and research shows that, at your age, you need at least 8 hours of sleep, then you tell me when you should sleep. Well, 6 hours in the morning, right? 6 a.m., 10 a.m. So what I really care here is that you have the necessary sleep to perform well next day. So the rule is you're going to sleep at 10, but the principle is you're going to sleep at 10 because that's what is best for you, because I need you to take care of yourself, because that's important to me and to you. Do you see the difference? And oftentimes we have lived in a world that tells us rules, but doesn't tell us principles. So when we are talking about principles, if the time changes and he no longer has to wake up at 6 a.m., but he has to wake up at 8 a.m., that rule can change. He doesn't have to go to sleep at 10, right? You can have a conversation about what to do. But then the concept will be there, and we are going to be teaching our children to adapt to the ideas and concepts and understand the idea behind things, as opposed to just saying 10 o'clock, I have to sleep. Well, you don't have to sleep at 10 o'clock if it's the weekend, when you don't need to wake up early. Right? Now, if you want to, because of your sanity, that's a different story. As a father, as a mother, you can say, hey, we all need a rest, right? And so I need you to sleep at 10 o'clock, because let's be honest, parents could use a little bit of sleep too. But you see what I'm saying? It's a higher level conversation about purpose and intention, rather than a negative conversation that's always about, you must do this or. Because that kind of conversation is always going to be a negative one. You're never going to come out well from that conversation. You got to sleep at 10 o'clock. There is no upside to you have to sleep at 10 o'clock. Right? There is only an adult nagging a teenager in the teenager's perspective. But if you have pre-agreed to that 8-hour rule, then you don't have to go into the negative piece. You just remind them of the care and love that you have for them, and therefore, this is what we're going to do. So, yes, love through limits. Love has limits. Love imposes limits for the rocket to take off. The rocket just can't decide to do anything it wants, otherwise the rocket won't reach its destination. The rocket needs to stay in a specific path to get there. So understanding and making this shift within us from principles to rules opens up the conversation and lets us talk about why we're doing things and what's important and what's our priorities and what is it that we are ultimately ready for. And that is great because if the mission changes, they will know how to correct themselves. We have then taught them how to make decisions on their own. Does it make sense? So it's important for us whenever we can, if we think we might want to take this, is to shift our thinking from rules to principles. Right? And that's number 3. And all right, so let's keep rocketing here, I should say. 4. Well, Houston, we have a problem. It's a classical one, right? Behavior is an indicator. We talked a little bit about earlier today, right? Problems are going to happen, and behavior is an indicator of need. People just don't decide to throw tantrums because they are excited about throwing a tantrum. There is an underlying emotional need that has not been met. So if we are able, as a society, not only parents, to shift that perspective and remind ourselves of that, that's a really great awareness, because we will look at that person and say, what does that person want? Whether it's a small kid, a medium-sized kid, or a big kid. And we all have those big kids in our lives, right? When we understand that the tantrum and the acting up is a need not met, you begin to troubleshoot and also understand that they are spirits too, right? Whether they are tiny tots, medium-sized containers, or large vessels for a spirit, they're all immortal spirits. And we all bring with ourselves, as we were talking here before, needs not only from this existence, but buried deep inside in what we call our subconscious, which is nothing else than our spiritual memory that has been repressed. These different emotional needs that we must consider. And that goes for ourselves too. When we are acting up, we may ask ourselves the question and say, wow, why did I do that? What did I want? Why did I yell at my boss? Or why did I was rude to my partner? Why is it that I said that? Sometimes we are advocating for ourselves without being conscious of our own needs. So we ask ourselves, when there's a kid throwing a tantrum, a grown-up throwing a tantrum, what is it that we need to kind of get after? An important piece here for us to remember as Spiritists too, is that we have come here, right, to work out kinks. We have come here to deal with problems. Problems are welcome. This is why we're here, to solve challenges and grow. And so we got to stop seeing problems as a deterrent, and we have to shift that as an opportunity for growth and learning. From a spiritual perspective, that's the explanation for reincarnation. Because Jesus has told us that his happiness is not of this world. So we haven't come here to be completely fulfilled and happy. We cannot expect that from this world. We can expect a very cool boot camp in which we are going to have to go through lessons and learn. And yes, we will be able to be happy while we're here. I'm not saying we have come to suffer. That's not what I'm saying. But we have come to deal with our shortcomings and learn how to interact with each other, solve problems together so that we can continue on our trajectory for the future. Are you with me so far? All right. So that's number 4. And we're going to keep going because we want to make up some of our time here as well. And what would be number 5? Well, number 5 will follow number 4 a little bit. Fail fast and fail forward. Do you think that the astronauts and the NASA engineering program was trying to not make mistakes? when they were trying to race to go to the moon? Or do you think that they were trying to learn things as fast as possible? Because if you're trying not to make mistakes, you have to slow down a lot. Now, if you are really interested in learning, you are going to embrace problems and challenges and mistakes as part of a growing process. Right? And so, it's okay not to know. In fact, many companies nowadays tell employees that if you are not trying things and not failing, you are not pushing the envelope and innovating fast enough. Go fast. Do what you gotta do. When you make a mistake, you go back, you fix it. And you learn. And then you do it again. Otherwise, what would take 10 years will take 50 years because you are so worried about making a mistake that you are not taking the necessary risks to really push your rocket forward. And when you're dealing with kids, they're learning what we are sharing, and it's important for us to share with them that everybody makes mistakes, including father and mother. And if we can model that to them and say, we make mistakes and here's how we recover, here are my options and here's what I'm going to do. When we say sorry, we are teaching them how to problem solve. We are modeling the behavior that we want grown-ups to have in the world. We are telling them it's okay for you to make a mistake. The important thing is for us to recover from those mistakes and keep on going. For some reason, our world has been so stuck on not making mistakes because we feel so insecure about ourselves that we don't want other people to think that we don't have it all figured out. But what we don't know is that everybody's thinking the same thing. And so we keep putting this image of ourselves that's not a healthy piece. We all are carrying some sort of burden that other people don't know about. And do we want our kids to carry this hidden burden by themselves, or do we want to teach them how to tackle their problems and problem solve? Because truth is, once you send your little astronauts out there, they're going to encounter things that you have no idea about because they're going to live in a different time and place. And what you want them to have is not your experience, is tools which they can make their own experience a more pleasant one. And when we're talking about spirituality and reincarnation, we know the world will continue to change, and we gotta equip them with this idea that it's okay to make mistakes. Of course, if we can avoid them, we will, but we should not do things because we're afraid of failing. We should do things because we are driven to do better things. And in a way, I feel like there is some sort of correlation here between Moses and Jesus, historically speaking, when with the New Testament, a whole new door opened to us. With the Old Testament, we were told what not to do. And that's what you do with children when they're really small. And when Jesus came about, instead of giving 10 commandments of things that we should not do, Jesus gave us commandments about what to do. Love. A new commandment I give you, a new commandment I leave you. Love one another as I have loved you. He has shifted from rules to principles. You see that? It's a beautiful thing because it sets the spirit forward, not holds us back. And with our kids, we want to do that. We want to set them forward. We want to prepare these little souls that look mighty cute in that tiny envelope because God knows what God's doing, right? Because if they look like little grown-ups when they're little, they would not survive, right? Let's be honest, right? Because you got to look cute. God is brilliant because you have to put in the cuteness, trigger in you because they drive you nuts to the point of you want to shake them, which you should never do that. And the moment you're gonna explode, they look at you and they go, and you're like, you melt, right? And like no teeth and drooling and everything else, and they're a mess. But they're so fragile that you have to care for them. But they're not that package. Just like you are not that package. So you got to see past the package. Spiritism alert us to that and help us begin to identify, even at an early age, what are some of the tendencies that a little spirit might have, and that we need to kind of trim as parents and work on that. And so it's important to model that because truth is, failure will get you there. Because all we do every day as parents is fail on things until we get it right. We fail swapping diapers, we fail knowing what to say, when to say, how to, who to say it to. But it works out. Because every time we do this, we learn. I don't know any parent out there who's got it figured out from the beginning. Right? I don't know how they let you walk out of the hospital with a baby after a day. Right? Are you sure you're going to let me walk out of here? Like, shouldn't you keep me here for another week? Right? Because there's no manual. And do I need a permit for this? Did anybody check? Did anybody check whether I am capable of sustaining human life? Right? Sure, I made it, but should I keep it? Right? But we're all awfully inadequate in the beginning to do stuff. But doesn't prevent us from raising great human beings. Right? And all we do all day long is fail. But in failing and adapting and changing, we get it right. And that's what matters. It's being on the journey together. Is doing what it takes to figure things out with your kids and send the idea that if they hit a wall, that's okay. They'll get up and they can find a way around it. Because they will hit a wall. We do hit a wall. Whether in this life or in the next life, if you give them those skills, what a beautiful world will it be right now for us. Right? So launching rockets in many different ways is a good metaphor for raising children. Because you set them in motion, you let them go. You have to let them go. It's their journey, like we said. Right? But there is a purpose. And the purpose here is for them to reach new heights. We just don't launch rockets because we launch rockets. We launch rockets for a purpose. And spiritually speaking, we launch rockets and put astronauts in there so they can go far from where we started. Our job is to prepare our reincarnating spirits who may or may not have been connected with us before to have the tools and the ability to take on their own trajectory and grow and leave the nest, which is really hard, by themselves, and that are able to do wonderful, wonderful and great things. Far from where they started. We don't want them to be where they started. Because even far from where they started is far from where they ought to be. We want them to continue to go far beyond. And I'm sometimes wondering if parenthood perhaps is not the most beautiful sort of love there is for us here on earth. I am reminded of Jesus Christ, our older brother, whom I oftentimes call JC. When he tells us in John, in the New Testament of John, and the Gospel of John, chapter 15, that no greater love there is than this, for a man or a woman to lay down their life for a friend. Parents do this on a daily basis. It's not about sacrificing your life at war. It's about letting go of what you want to do and sacrificing your life for other people. It's those weekends that you don't have for yourself anymore because now you have soccer, ballet classes, singing, capoeira, whatever it is that you have, right? Play, date, party, park, right? And still hear when you're in the bathroom for 5 minutes, Mommy, Daddy, what we're gonna do? I'm in the bathroom, right? It's a constant self-sacrifice that is hard for us to imagine when we don't experience it firsthand. Because it's not a one-time thing, it's a constant thing. It requires us to come out of our spiritual shells and care for other human beings or spirits. And care just enough as not to expect them to do anything in return for us, other than the occasional hug, which is not a bad thing. But we give so much to our children because we just want them to be happy. And that's the beginning of this incredible spiritual love and a level of awareness and consciousness that pervades the whole cosmos, but that only now we are beginning to feel in our hearts. It's learning to give without expecting. It's learning to cheer for somebody else's victories without wanting anything in return. It's being happy for the rocket, for just taking off, even if you don't know exactly where it's going to land, because once it takes off, there's not much else you can do. You can point it the right way, you can train the astronauts, you can go over the math, you can make a plan, but the truth is, once it's out, your job as mission control is to provide some advice via radio every once in a while. If they turn the radio on. And all you see is that beautiful wake going far away, and then you need binoculars to kind of find out where he has gone because you can no longer be there. But that the rocket has launched is a testament of everything that you have done until then. And so every time that you feel discouraged, remember that you have been given this incredibly difficult task of launching your own little spiritual rockets into a world that is tough to navigate. But that you must have faith in everything that you do to set them in the right direction and trust that it is their journey from there on. And then let it go. And with that in mind, we hope that more and more we are able to not only create great environments in which children can thrive and grow to be the spiritual beings and reach the fulfillment and wholeness that we want for them, that God wants for them. Because then our job will be done. And there's nothing better than that consciousness of certainty about having done the best that you could. Yes, we're always going to look back and say, I could have done more. But if you put your heart into it, right, and you send your little astronauts out there, you have to remember there's another mission control as well. That one's also watching out for all of us. So don't be discouraged, and remember that it's their journey, that everyone is different. They all have different launches. They will encounter problems, and you have to navigate all those challenges. And that making mistakes and modeling correcting from mistakes is perhaps one of the great things we can do, not only for our children, but for all those around us, because our children will be our parents in the future as well. And so if we equip them today, who knows, maybe they will also be better apt to launch our own little rockets in the future when hopefully we come back to be together again. So with joy and hope in my heart, knowing that even if our mission control was not adequate, or that of our parents, there's always a greater plan out there watching out for us. Let us not forget that we're never alone in this beautiful act, that we are never by ourselves, and that everything will be okay even when we encounter problems, but we have to trust the process and trust the people and understand that at the end of the day, God is in control and everything is going to be okay. Does that make sense? All right, so I invite all of us to think about our rockets, how to best prepare them, how to best launch them, and to what end, and hope that more and more we'll have a lot of joy watching them grow. Yeah. Thank you very much.